kid president videos. Anybody watch those? I think they're really funny. So this morning's sermon is a little bit different, and so I just want you to bear with me. It's a little bit confessional. And it's done that way on purpose, obviously. I have a couple disclaimers in regard to that. The first one is I am not a woman. I'm just not. I'm not a woman. If you're shocked by that, I'm sorry. I didn't know if that comes as a shock. So, obviously for guys in the ministry who are preachers or have a role in ministry or expected to preach on Mother's Day, it can be a challenge to speak to that. And so this sermon is more of a confessional sermon about my experience with the idea, the concept of mom. And so Josh had read something the last couple of years about Mother's Day, because it can be a very conflicting day for some people. It can be a day of celebration, but it can be a day of frustration for others. And there is sometimes some baggage that women carry with it, and so today we're not going to gloss over any of that, but instead we're going to kind of speak to that, and going to give you a little bit of a glimpse into kind of my experience with that. And so it's a little bit of a confessional sermon, but it's also an encouraging sermon in the respect that it encourages women to be moms, whatever that looks like to you. It encourages you to do that, okay? So I just want to give you that disclaimer this morning and kind of tell you a little bit about my experience growing up with my mom. We had kind of a rough ride, and our relationship has always been a little bit frustrating. We've had periods of time when we haven't talked at all for years. And so it's been, like, when I think of Mother's Day, I'm one of the people that it brings up certain emotions, within me. And it's not just a day where I say, oh, yay, Mom. It's something a lot more than that. And at the same time, I remember great times with my mom when, we would dance to country music in the kitchen or go for a bike ride and have a picnic. And so even though that relationship with my mom has been strained over the years, I still appreciate the mom kinds of things that she did in my life. And so when I talk about Mother's Day, I not only think of my mom, but I think of two other women in my life that really had an impact on me. And one of them was my mom's friend, whose name was Pat. After my parents got divorced, we had a rough time of it. We lived in this kind of old, broken down farmhouse that was half painted and very poorly insulated. And in the winter, we'd have to shut off all the rooms and live in one room, and it was that kind of thing. And I never went without, food-wise, or anything like that. But it was, we didn't have a lot of money, and Pat was a friend of my mom's that kind of hung in there with us, And she did a lot of the mom kinds of stuff to the point where she kind of called me her son sometimes. And so when you think about people in your life that have been a mom to you, it isn't always your biological or your adopted mom, right? Because there are other people who do mom kinds of things. And I remember throughout all of the years when we would go together to Walmart or something like that, and she would buy me something that I knew, and she knew that my mom couldn't afford, like music CDs or things like that. And I thought, that's really like a mom, like a parent role. A person in my life that's not biologically related to me doing a very mom kind of thing, even to the point of like babysitting and things like that. The other woman in my life that wasn't technically my mom, but she has obviously become like a second mom to me, is my stepmom, Carolyn. And when my dad and Carolyn got married in '83, I was very apprehensive, I think, as a lot of kids are when one of your parents gets married. And I thought, what is this going to be like? Is she going to try to replace my mom? How do I even feel about her? Should I, keep her at a distance or whatever? But she turned out to be this extremely nice person who put up with a lot of my nonsense, just like moms do, And so I was blessed during childhood to have these three women in my life who, to varying degrees, played the mom role. And so this morning, I kind of want us to examine that biblically and examine that in our own lives, because I feel like when we cast that role too narrowly, we kind of disregard what God does with people in their own lives. See, I truly believe that God does give us what we need at the right time. I believe that He is our provider. And so if we need a mom, whether or not we have our biological mother, like, God will send that to us when we need it. And it's amazing how sometimes we don't even think about those kinds of things. I often think about when Dylan, our son, came to live with us at age 4, and we adopted him, how all of a sudden he had a ton of grandmas everywhere. You know what I mean? Grandmas were popping up everywhere and taking him everywhere, and all. It was our church family, right? Our church family came up, rose up, and became this other family to us that otherwise we wouldn't have had. And so God is faithful to do this work in us. And so we want to talk about that this morning. The first thing is that sometimes God fills the mom role with different people in our lives. Our relationships take on different dynamics, and those nurturing roles usually filled by biological moms aren't always filled by them, or they're complemented by other people in our lives. And God sometimes fills those roles in our lives with people who are available and willing. Summer and I did foster care for a while. And if you've ever done foster care, foster parenting, you know what a challenge it is to have different kids in your house at different times and different ages all of a sudden, and different issues that you're dealing with. But I also think that there's just no other ministry quite like it, because all of a sudden you're being a parent to kids who have had probably a very different experience than what you're going to give them. I don't think we often think of foster care as a ministry that we could get involved in. We think of it as, for a lot of people, for a lot of young couples, and that was the case for Summer and I, it was a way to, like a stepping stone to adoption. But I think we found out along the way that it was a great actual ministry just in and of itself. Because the church has that obligation to take care of the orphan and the widow, right? We have that imperative in Scripture. And so if we have that imperative, we absolutely have to follow that, right? And so sometimes God uses us as the parent, even though we're not technically how people define parent, right? And while it may not be our first choice, we have to allow God to let people in our lives who can in some way fill those roles that we need. I'm guessing, I would guess that there are people here who have had the kind of experience that maybe I just shared with you this morning about having a rough ride with one of your parents or with your mother, which is what we're talking about this morning. And if you've had that experience, I hope that you've allowed other people, that you've allowed other women to fill that role in your life. Because I think sometimes when we have that experience, we don't want anybody else to be that. Right? We say, well, in my experience, the word mother, maybe the word mother brings up pain. And I don't want somebody to fill that role. But I want to encourage you that God is probably setting somebody up or sending somebody to you, or has somebody in your life that is filling that role, but you have to kind of let them in and do that, right? Summer's a great example. She's going to feature a lot in this sermon because Summer and I talk a lot about these things. And like I said, this is kind of a confessional sermon and fairly personal. And so you're going to get to know me even more so than you do. Aren't you excited? It's very exciting. Summer's mother passed away when she was 14. And it's not really talking out of turn, because she and I talked about this before I prepared this sermon to share this with you, that it's been a struggle for her. For those of you who have lost parents, lost moms early on, it can be very difficult. And I don't know that it ever is easy. I can't envision a time when that's easy, no matter how old you are. And she's kind of struggled with that, but she has 4 aunts who have taken the role of mom in her life, and they've been such a blessing to her. They just spent Friday in Chicago doing, basically like mom and daughter kinds of things. And so my point is that if Summer had just become kind of angry and bitter about that thing and just said, no, I think I'm done with that kind of nurturing, she would have pushed those people out of her lives. And I think the lesson is not just for moms, but for anybody in a mentor-mentee kind of relationship, whether it's parents or whatever, is that sometimes we're not willing because we think that people have hurt us too much or because there's no worth in it. But when God sends somebody into your life in that respect, in that way, you have a duty to accept it, right? You have a duty to take it on. You have a duty to own that blessing. And I know that it's been a great blessing to her at times when she, especially during our wedding when we were getting married. Of course, sometimes 4 aunts involved in your wedding can not be a blessing. But, what a great thing to have, what a great resource to have. And so we have to kind of do our duty and allow those people into our lives. And of course, a lot of these lessons are not just about moms and daughters and things like that, because like I said, it's for all of us to understand that when God places somebody in our life, we have to allow them in and not let pain or not let frustration or even just ego sometimes, if we think we know more, sometimes we need to let that go by the wayside and allow somebody into our lives who can speak into our lives and be that nurturing role that we might need and maybe not even know that we need. I love this passage in John 19 because it's so out of the blue. With Jesus, preparing to give his all, the greatest sacrifice in John chapter 19, and it's very impactful at the same time that it seems so odd that this would be a priority for him. He's in this case, he's dying for the sin of the world. The sin of the world is upon him, and he's in excruciating pain on the cross. And then in verse 25 it says, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved, John, standing nearby, he said to her, woman, here is your son. And to the disciple, here is your mother. From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. There are a couple things that we can kind of take out of this passage. I think the first one is that this kind of relationship, like this kind of like mother-parent, mother-son or mother-daughter relationship, like we all need that, right? It's important enough for Jesus to pair these two up at the cross. When all of this other stuff is going on, it's important enough for him to do this thing, not just for her sake, but for his sake, right? For both of them. And then the second thing is that it's not just important for those two to come together and have this kind of relationship, but it also teaches us that we need that in our lives. We absolutely have to have it. And I think it's illustrated well by this little story, and it seems a little odd, but some of you who are in hiring or in business might be familiar with this concept. I interviewed it with a church a long time ago. It might have been about 5 years ago. And it was a phone interview, and the guy on the other end said, hey, I want to ask you kind of an odd question. I said, well, that's, whatever, that's okay. I've been in weird interviews and interviewed at churches all over the place, nothing really surprised me. And he said, how is your relationship with your dad? I said, well, it's good, it's fine. Never had any big issues or anything. And he said, well, I know that's kind of a weird question, but he said that studies show that sometimes it's a predictor of how well you take authority and how well you listen to other people and how well you can work with other people and how well you take direction. I said, well, that kind of makes sense. And I felt like it was a little bit of a personal question because I'm a very personal, kind of private person in a lot of ways. But at the same time, I understood the question in the respect that when you have those relationships in your life, that they're important enough that if God makes those relationships happen while he's on the cross, then obviously we need those things, right? We have to have those things at somewhere along the way in our journey. And I know even for some people, like that happens late in life. Like sometimes your home life can be bad enough that you don't have a mom figure until later in life, right? And so at this point, you guys are like, wow, this is a downer, right? This is rough. Yeah, it is a little rough on Mother's Day, and here's why. Because the second point is so important. And my second point is sometimes we are the people, specifically all the women in here, like you can be the people that fulfills that mom role. I think there's nothing more significant or more appropriate on Mother's Day than to say that as the church, like you women here, can be like moms to other people, not just your kids. Certainly your children, absolutely. Obviously, don't stop doing that or anything. But obviously, like there is a world full of hurt, right? Who need the kind of nurturing that really like the stereotypical mom can give, right? Like we also may not have the personality of a stereotypical mom, but our caring in our own unique way is the most important thing. Sometimes Summer calls me the mom of the house, and I'm not exactly, I guess it's because I bug Dylan about things and I tidy up or behind people, and I don't know what all that means, but like she calls me the mom to the point where she said she was going to get me an apron that says "Mom rules" or so. No, I'm good. I don't wear aprons, but but I am kind of more inclined to do that stuff. But the important thing is that it gets done. And in the kingdom, especially in a world that is hurting, there are all kinds of things that women can do in the role of a nurturer. And maybe that's not your first, as a woman, maybe that's not your first inclination. But I think at the same time, like just even considering like partnering with other women, standing beside women when they're hurting, helping younger women, when they first get married, when they have their kids, and that kind of thing, like older women doing that. Those are the kinds of things that the church body should be doing. Likewise, when we did adopt Dylan, it was a great lesson in how this kind of thing works. Like Summer is not his biological mom. And so when Dylan kind of comes along, and says, well, you're not, and this is a typical thing that adopted kids will throw back at you. They'll say, well, you're not my real mom. And, sometimes they'll say, well, you're not my real dad. I say, well, I got papers, man. Like I got lawyers and notarized stuff and checks, cashier's checks. I got it all, man. I got the official record, And so the point is like, and sometimes I've told him, and he doesn't say it a lot, but when he does say that stuff, I say, yeah, but I'm here, man, Like when you get sick in the middle of the night, we're here. We do parent stuff. We're your parents, Not biological, but in every other way, we do all the parent stuff that parents do. And this is exactly my kind of point. Like there are people who are hurting in our world, and women, you can be that nurturing role in their lives, in the lives of hurting people, even if sometimes they don't even know that they need that. I also wanted to say this real quick because I felt like, in the role of the people that I shared with you, that, our family friend Pat and my stepmother Carolyn, that there are women who never end up having the official title of mom. But don't ever think, if that's you, don't ever think that you didn't do mom stuff. You know what I mean? like, don't ever think about the fact that, well, I'm not a mom or whatever. Like, I feel like sometimes that can be a feeling that happens. And I just look at those two women in my life and I think, what would have been different about my life if I hadn't had those two women acting like moms and doing mom-like stuff for me when I was a kid and we didn't have any money, or when life was difficult, or, that kind of stuff, if I didn't have those people in my life. And so like you can be that person. Psalm 113:9 says, he gives the barren woman a home, making her the joyous mother of children. I think that when I read that verse, though, I think that God doesn't always do that by giving someone a biological child. I think sometimes it works in different ways, and whether you're a stepmom or a friend or a grandma, or an honorary grandma of somebody, I feel like God does that in so many different ways. We just have to be open to it, because God provides through us at times. And of course, it may not be according to our plan. He may make you a mom even though you never gave birth. Conversely, like in our case, he made somebody a mom by having their primary role just be giving birth, and that was it. So I kind of wanted to end with this. It's not a real long sermon this morning, but I think this is an important thing. It says sometimes women, and this is me speaking to women, I'm not an authority, so I should say that. But I feel like this is really an important passage, that sometimes God will lead you to do mom stuff. Go do it. And like instinctually, you'll probably go to great lengths to do it. In Matthew 15:21-28, this is a great example of this. It says, leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him crying out, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly. Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciples came to him and urged him, send her away, for she keeps crying out after us. But he answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. The woman came and knelt before him. Lord, help me, she said. He replied, it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Yes, it is, Lord. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. Then Jesus said to her, woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted, and her daughter was healed at that moment. So I usually try to stay away from stories about Dylan. Obviously, I have broken that rule this morning, and so I'm just going to tell you one more. I hope he's in the green room listening to rap music right now instead of paying attention. Normally I wouldn't say that, but this would be a good time for that. So, I've seen Dylan get in a couple of fights at school. Like when he was younger, I used to walk to get him from school. I think he might have been in 4th grade in this case. And, if you're a parent, or if you have some attachment to a kid, like when you see this kind of stuff happen, and when it's your kid, you're like, you get all like what they call Papa Bear or Mama Bear. You're just like, not my kid. Oh, no. You're not going to touch my kid, And so like he was getting into this fight with this kid who was really like huge, like way bigger than me. No, not me, way bigger than him. And no, he wasn't bigger than me. Wow. Yeah, he was the world's largest 4th grader. And I think he had been a mutant. Anyway, so he was getting in this fight with this kid who was way larger than him, and I realized for the first time within me that I had to hold back, I just wanted to take that kid and get him off my kid no matter what, I can't do that, because there's something inside of me, there's something internally that just I just have to protect my kid, and parents, you know what I'm talking about. You know when you're there. And so when you see this passage and you look at what happens with this woman, she's like, I'm not taking no for an answer. It's my kid. My daughter is going to be healed, and I'm going to argue with Jesus until that happens, basically. And so even though Jesus rebuffs her, she does this thing. Her tenacity keeps on going. And we often forget something in these exchanges in the Gospels, and namely that's that women who operate on faith, who take a risk of faith, these are the people that Jesus honors so many times. And so, and obviously a lot of stuff that I'm talking about this morning can go for dads too, but like moms, women, if you don't hold the technical title of mom, whatever, you can be an advocate for the people around you. You can be an advocate for your kids. You can be an advocate, obviously, for your husbands. You can be an advocate for other kids. Do those things, right? Like, be a mom, even when, you're off the clock, Like, be a mom when the world needs you to be a mom, Do mom stuff. Because there's so many kids and so many adults even who are hurting, who haven't had that kind of nurturing, who haven't had that kind of experience. The church can give that experience to people who need it. I believe that. And women, as you know, that's the kind of thing that really you do. I hate to stereotype here, but speaking for most men, I can tell you that you do it far better than we do. Like, our version is like, tapping somebody lightly and saying, they're there, and then going out to the garage and fixing something for several hours, That's how we do things, for the most part. And so we need you to fill that role in the church. There's a great ministry in that. And I hope I haven't belabored that point, but I think it's so important. Seeing so many people who haven't had good family lives, who haven't had good experiences with their mothers or their fathers, like that's our job. We can fill that role. We can do that. I believe it. Let's pray. God, I thank you for the moms in this room today, and I don't mean just the moms who've given birth and are raising kids, but I mean anybody who's done mom stuff. I really thank you for them, because they really do. They do things that allow the world to be a better place and really advance your kingdom. And I thank you for them. Help us to have the focus of almost having like the attitude of being a mom, having that be a ministry to people who need that. I just pray that we have a sensitivity to it, and that we also allow people in our lives who can be those nurturers that we need. I know that sometimes we need those things and won't admit it or won't acknowledge it. But help us to be willing to follow your lead in those things. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.